Hello and welcome to Peanutopia. As I mentioned last time, there is supposed to be a fueling station for the peanut limousine, and it should look a little bit like you can see in those sketches. So like a thin stem of a plant that is growing out of the ground with this crown of oil bubbles at the top. And there is also this drop shape at the front. And I want it to be located inside a desert. To get an overall idea of the look and feel of the desert, I made this concept using ProCreate, and I chose a warm sunset mood for this whole scene. So as you can see, there are some peanut inspirations gathered all over the place. At first we have these huge peanut-shaped rocks, and then there is also this peanut shell structure going over the ground, but also covering the rocks and the stones. And also for the plants, I wanted to have some cactus-inspired plants, but to give them a little bit of a peanut shell structure on top of them. And the fruits look a little bit like small peanuts placed on top of the plants. In Blender, I started with a quick blockout of the desert. So I just created the basic shapes of the rocks and placed them on a simple plane. And then for the background, I scaled them down to create the illusion of depth and make them seem as if they were really far away. Then I continued with the creation of the fueling station, starting with some curves. I traced the shape of the round corners and also the drop in the middle. And then I faced it up to have an object which I was able to extrude. Then I wanted to decide which shape I liked more, the one where the plane is just extruded, or the one which is point symmetrical with 4 sides that all look the same. And I decided to go with the point symmetrical one because I think this looks a little bit more like a plant that is growing out of the desert. So I wanted to keep a little bit this plant feeling, as if those oil bubbles at the top were like a mushroom or something like that. After adding a brick base, I worked on the bottom glass piece, where the circle and the drop shape are extruded into the empty space of the base. Then I also added some glass columns at the corners, where there's also supposed to be some oil inside. And I also worked on the glass bubbles and connected them to the bottom glass part. Here I took care to work only with quad-based topology, because this gives me more control for the animation, and later on I want to make the glass move. I also connected the middle glass parts from the drop shape that are going upwards to create some kind of a bridge. And finally I figured it would be better to also have the rocks quad-based, so I just replaced all those meshes. Even though many details of the environment are still missing, I made a small texture test using a watercolor peanut texture that I made some time ago in Substance Designer. For this one, I created some brush strokes that are supposed to look like watercolor. So I have an input shape and it gets transformed to generate a watercolor effect. Here you can see the whole process of the transformation. And there's also one step that makes this darker edge where the water accumulates. And you can use this one with different shapes and just plug them in. So that's what I did in here. I just blended different brush strokes together to generate some different masks and use them for those color blends. For the other maps, I just used a Voronoi texture with some adjustments. so that the look resembles a little bit the cells of a peanut shell. Back in Blender, I added some of the shaders that I used for the car to the bricks, but also to the base of the fueling station. I just changed the colors a little bit, but these are still experiments, so no final version. Then I also scaled down some duplicates of the glass to use them as the oil. I just realized that the glass isn't really that transparent because you couldn't see the oil quite well. So I increased the blending factor for the transparent BSDF inside the glass shader to make it far more transparent and make the oil more visible for now. And finally, I also added the texture that I created in Substance Designer to one of the peanut rocks, just to get a first impression of how the whole scene could look. As you can see, the desert is still a work in progress, but that's the current state. And next time I'll introduce the first character, who's also driving the peanut limousine. So hope I'll see you there. Thanks and bye.